Thank you, Naomi.
All right, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me online. I guess you'll let me know if you can't. So thanks, Joe and chairs, for having me. So I also lead our privacy engineering program, and which sits within our cybersecurity and privacy applications group, which sits within our applied cybersecurity division. So you heard a lot of applied. That's intentional. Our sister division, the computer security division, is where a lot of our research takes place. But the goal, the objective with the applied cybersecurity division was that would be where we would do applied solutions. So sort of, trying to move from research to deployment. And so in that sort of, in my time at NIST, I've currently leading interagency groups with other agencies on how do we get pets adopted more widely in federal agencies. I've worked in a variety of areas on trying to get pilots going, always trying to use privacy enhancing technologies. I helped to co-chair the interagency group that drafted the administration's national strategy to advance privacy preserving data sharing and analytics. And I have a link at the end and resources, so don't worry if you didn't memorize that. But in that strategy, again, talk a lot about the challenges of adopting pets. And I know this is specific to DP, but differential privacy, but the challenges, the sort of non-research challenges that DP faces are very, pretty much the same as with other pets. So, I have a lot of experience in trying, understanding where the challenges lie, and you've probably heard before, it's, rarely the technology, it's usually all the other factors, the people, and the various sort of implementation decisions that need to be made. So, what I'm going to talk to you a bit about today, notwithstanding my very confident title, I think I have more questions to share with you than answers, but I can highlight where the challenges are, some of which I think are not particularly amenable to research answers, and some of which are. So we can discuss that. And the one other thing I would say is, hear a lot, the sort of almost sort of like frantic, angsty feel, like, why aren't pets maturing? Like, why aren't they being widely adopted? And I would say that, if you think about where pets are and DP is in sort of that technology development arc or life cycle, I would put, if there's sort of some people, categorize that sort of a research, ascent, maturity, sort of decline cycle. I would say we're sort of at like that, the cusp of from research to ascent. And so we're not even at maturity. And so I think a lot of the challenges you see are, they're the challenges of getting from research to ascent. And I think it's helpful to like focus on that, like what can we do to get ourselves into ascent before worrying about like how do we get ourselves into maturity. So we're not going to skip over a cycle in technology development, in my opinion. So I guess at that sort of lead in, I mean, the other thing I'd say is, after lunch, so I'd love to make this interactive. So if you have questions, I'd rather have a conversation, but certainly will leave time at the end if you want to wait. But if you're online or here and you just want to jump in, I'd love to have a conversation personally. Okay, so with that. So how come it switches on my, oh, there we go. Okay. It says the lag. All right, wait, it said 90 seconds. I'm not very patient. Okay, so starting with some people problems. And I think, this is probably falls in that category that's not so amenable to research solutions. But in my experience, one of the key things that organizations need when they're trying something new is to have a champion. And a champion, it doesn't actually matter like exactly what part of the organization they come from. Sometimes it's the lawyer, sometimes it's a privacy person, sometimes it's a data science person. But what matters is that they have the sort of skill set to help educate and rally people and coordinate with people. But very rarely, I think, do pilots succeed and new technologies get adopted without a champion at some point in the organization. And, one of the things that I see and hearing from agencies is that, there's sort of knowledge gaps. The saying, it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I think it's kind of very similar. It takes a large part of the organization to implement differential privacy or any type of pet. You're going to need coordination across all sorts of components, from data science to the IT to engineering, security, the privacy office, and lawyers, as well as sort of the business owner decision maker, right? And the data owners. So all those people have to sort of understand what's going on, and very rarely do they all actually understand what differential privacy is, what it could be used for, and so there's these sort of knowledge gaps and this coordination that has to happen across all of these groups. And I'll talk more about these different groups as we go, but they each have their own sort of perspective. And both their own unique kinds of lack of understanding or things that they want to understand, and the things that they're concerned about. Getting faster. Okay, so that title is a little tongue-in-cheek, obviously. But this is, and I think, this is a place where research can help. This is an issue that, comes up again and again and again. So, first of all, people in organizations don't necessarily understand what differential privacy can be used for, and what, and how it matches to the use cases that they have, right? How they want to use data. Joe is one of our authors on a blog series that we did on differential privacy, and the sort of format that we tried with the blog series was to start with sort of a scenario. We started it one fall, and so we picked up selling pumpkin spice lattes. And we tried to keep that scenario through so that people could understand, like, hey, if I want to do this with data, like, how could I do it in a more privacy protective way? And so, starting with that business case, and this is something that I found very successful when talking with agencies, because it's sometimes researchers or others will ask the question like, okay, well, what do you want to do with pets? And the answer is like, I have no idea, right? Like, I don't know anything about pets. But what they do know is like what they want to do with data, and how there might be having, security or privacy obstacles to like getting to that goal. So if we ask the question, what do you want to do with data? Then we can show them, okay, how could you use differential privacy to help you achieve that goal? And I think this is even more important, in the blog series. We started off with, very basic sort of, trend analysis and data disclosure. But more and more, we're seeing how differential privacy can be combined with other types of pets, like, privacy enhancing cryptography to, close a variety of attacks. And that actually broadens the set of use cases. It makes it, I think, really interesting. And, because also you get the sort of people who are like, well, I'm not trying to like disclose data, right? And, publicly. So I don't, DP isn't for me. So helping people really understand what DP can be used for is very important. The other part is, ease of use. And I, know, of course, that OpenDP is working on these, this kind of abstraction layer that will, help make it more turnkey for people to use, organizations to use, and that's great. But we've seen, as organizations like Census has posted code, and they're like, well, we posted this code, but nobody's using it. And we at NIST, again with Joe's help, created this privacy engineering collaboration space and have all these open source tools. And that was actually one of the reasons why we did the blog series, because we had all these tools and nobody was really coming to like use them or play with them or comment on them. And so we thought, well, if we do a blog series, maybe we can explain like how to use them, and that will help. But I think the truth of the matter is people just want it to be easy. And so without that sort of abstraction layer that's going to connect all the libraries and things underneath to making easy sort of decisions, it's going to be hard to get widespread adoption. So here again, I think research can be helpful, but this is, really knotty challenge, these sort of trust risk decisions. So again, we've heard from organizations that, the champions or anyone, they don't really know how to communicate like what protections are, what that DP is going to provide. And I don't mean like in sort of like the very basic way. I mean in the sense of like, how do you actually trust that it's going to manage the sort of degree of privacy risk, to an acceptable degree, right? I mean, that's how you make a risk decision. Short of just not doing anything, you're not going to have zero risk. So how do you find out what that residual degree of risk is that's acceptable? And so again, this is an area that NIST obviously is very focused on, being a metrology agency. And so we have a project we call the Collaborative Research Cycle, where anybody can send in algorithms for de-identification, and we evaluate them against a common data set. And so a number of entities have sent in ones on differential privacy, but you can do it on any type of de-identification. And then sort of, publish those results so everybody can sort of compare it and evaluate it that way. Also, based off of the blog, we were able, the blog series, again, Joe's an author. We have a special publication, 800-226 guidelines for evaluating differential privacy guarantees. So that's out in draft with the goal of releasing it before the end of October this year. So, and, so again, trying to help people sort of understand, how do we evaluate differential privacy guarantees? Like, what are the metrics that we're going to use? And also understanding the threat model. So this, very much came up in a price challenge that we did with the UK and other US agencies. And this one was actually on privacy preserving federated learning, but this again, sort of referencing back to the importance of how differential privacy can be combined with other types of pets to sort of close all of the sort of attack vectors that were discussed in training models, in machine learning models. So, this is coming up again over and over again with organizations because they don't even understand exactly what the threat model is. So how can they evaluate what they're and make a risk decision if they don't even understand the threat model? So, so I think developing those in more detail will be very helpful. Trade-off is another huge area for organizations in deployment. And so, I should have told you that for better or worse, this is going to be a math-free presentation. But so I'm not here to talk about epsilon. Those that intimately, far better than I, frankly. But those are the kinds of things, at least at the broad level, trying to understand sort of the utility versus accuracy trade-off, and many other trade-offs. And this is, I think, an area that we've really pushed in the differential privacy guidelines, is really trying to help organizations understand where the different trade-offs are, not just for epsilon, but all through the deployments, and how, and then again, this brings back to that collaboration, that you really have to be collaborating with the various different parts of the organization, the data scientists who are going to help with that accuracy, the business owners who need the utility, and so on. And understanding and helping the lawyers understand where those trade-offs are and why they may be acceptable. And the other big issue, of course, being NIST, and standards is in our name, is ideally, right, we would like to have standards, because standards allow third parties to do certifications, and that's ultimately what really helps organizations and business owners make their decisions, because they're never going to understand the math. So, and they're not interested in it, and it's not useful to them. But what they want to know is, does this thing work? And what do I get for this? And does it actually perform the way I thought? So, but it's a real question. Standards, if you look on sort of those technology development descriptions, standards are usually in maturity. And, we're just getting into ascent. So what kinds of standards could we do today, and what could we try to achieve? Joe and I have talked about this a lot, and I wonder, will we ever, people say to me, companies and agencies, is, can you just tell us where to set epsilon? Obviously they want that, right? But I wonder if we even will get to that in a standard, because it's so contextual. But maybe we can. I think you as the researchers are in the best position to grapple with that and figure out if we can get there. I mean, I think at the very least we can get to sort of a better understanding of ranges and different types of use cases, and that alone could be very helpful. So that brings me to regulatory uncertainty. I think I've mentioned lawyers a number of times as being part of the package, and in talking again about sort of the different perspectives, and what they're interested in is, of course, is compliance, right? Is differential privacy help us comply with the law? And if it doesn't, and then for them, it's kind of a big shrug. And the problem, so if you're familiar with GDPR, or at least have heard of it, is that unlike security, privacy didn't go down a path of sort of reasonable measures commensurate with risk. And I think that is a shame, because what that allowed in security was sort of this constant evolution that research, could really help with, because it's always sort of raising the bar. Every time you get better, that becomes, that technical solution becomes more reasonable. And then there's always residual risk, and research can help to narrow that gap. And then that raises the level again on what's reasonable. But because privacy didn't really go down that path, there hasn't been a strong incentive, one, to use these technologies, and two, some of the way they define things, like defining anonymization, which I have no issue from a research perspective of having a definition that's basically impossible to get to, because it always gives you like a nice high bar to keep reaching for. But putting that into law means that no one can reach it, and therefore everybody's uncertain about doing anything less than perfection. And so most organizations are often fairly risk averse, especially lawyers. I'm speaking as a lawyer by training, and so they're not that interested in putting in the cost to try a new technology if they're not sure of the legal benefit that they're going to get. And so you're definitely seeing a change in Europe and the UK, particularly in terms of beginning to provide guidance about how pets and DP can help meet their their definitions in their laws. But that's like a gap that they now have to fill with their guidance, because the laws weren't initially set up as, use reasonable measures commensurate with risk, in which case people could have tried to experiment more with the pets. And, even if it wasn't perfect, it could still be considered reasonable. But right now they're stuck in this space of, do I either hit the mark and this data is anonymized, or have I not hit the mark? And so that's what creates that regulatory uncertainty, and makes it hard for the lawyers to sort of get on board with this. And so these are some of the resources. So encourage you to look at the NIST Privacy Engineering Program. We have collaboration space. You can find the collaborative research cycle there. We've also recently, we're developing a PETS test bed, so you can learn more about that, and our guidelines for evaluating differential privacy guarantees. The draft, at least, is there. And as I said, the final version will be coming shortly. And if you're interested in seeing what the Biden administration had to say about privacy preserving data sharing and analytics and the role of pets and some of the challenges, I think it's a very good read. Right. So with that,
anybody have questions? If I recall correctly, Biden's executive order on AI, issued last October, requested federal agencies to work with NIST to evaluate their processes evaluate whether the data processing can be compliant with pets or can be integrated with pets. How is this work? Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so there is a section on evaluating AI and yes, and using pets with that. And so evaluating pets, like doing test beds. So so that test bed that I just mentioned, we are, just to be frank about how executive orders work, sometimes we, agree to do things that we already plan to do. And so we have been working on this test bed idea for some time. And as I said, we already have the one on de-identification. So that's how we'll be evaluating that. And as I mentioned, we work in the interagency to encourage adoption and make that cycle between, hey, do you want to do a pilot? And you can use the test bed to help you before you actually take it back and actually use real data and things like that. So those are the ways that we're trying to, create that positive feedback loop.
Right. So how do we fix the laws? Because, GDPR is a mess. And, it's made my life horrible because of all the cookie pop-ups that have no impact. And the call out on anonymized data is mathematically indefensible. But in the US, HIPAA interpretation by HHS, the de-identification rules there are also mathematically indefensible, especially the safe harbor provisions. And California is now doing something similarly bad. And yet we'd like to see privacy laws, but they're all really bad from a technical point of view. And there seems to be no interest in fixing them. So you're a lawyer, and they're just not paying attention to reality. So what do we do?
Yeah, it's a challenge. I've certainly, when called upon, I mean, there is a little bit of a bright spot. There was the Privacy Enhancing Technologies Research Act that was recently passed by the House. So, maybe, hopefully, we could get it, see it further along to the Senate.
It's not. Nobody's going to get sued over that.
No, but it's a start. When we did a lot of when we were building the privacy engineering program and the foundations to support it, we looked at cybersecurity as a model and saw that they had security objectives like confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So we developed a set of privacy engineering objectives, as you well know, on predictability, manageability, and disassociability. You can find them on the privacy engineering website because, we wanted to be able to associate technologies and pets with different objectives, and the different types of capabilities that you might try to, achieve under the, or towards those objectives. Because we saw that helped security. But, I think those objectives didn't really take off. They were created by computer science professors in the 70s in a paper. And then they really seemed to take off when they got embedded in FISMA, in law in like 2000. And so, and that's also, when NIST really started working on cybersecurity. And so, we embedded the privacy engineering objectives in that act, in the definition. And, because we're like, okay, this is an opportunity, because, you need all of these pieces. You can't have just the great technology. You got to have the structure that people can actually, the engineers can say, what's the capability? What's the objective I'm going for? How do I map that in? So I 100% agree. It's not perfect, but it's a little bit of a start. On the other piece, as I said, the Europeans, they're starting to feel like they're recognizing, the issues that they've created, and they're starting to fill that with guidance, like about how to do it. And so I think you'll see more of that. You'll see more guidance, and there are opportunities to, with their AI regulation. I think they've taken another step towards a risk-based approach, and so they are learning. And over time, you can, get to a better place. But it's a hump that has to be overcome because they started, as you say, from a place that you know, I don't want to say it was antithetical to technologies, but it creates friction, right? It hasn't exactly encouraged it, I think is the issue. So I think there's a question there and, oh, okay, great.
Cool. So I guess the flip side of that bridge, on the engineering side, a lot of internal teams are generally not interested in privacy alone for like the moral sake of privacy or even the legal sake of privacy. And they also just don't want trade-offs. But we have to make it happen. We have to like bring privacy to the company broadly, to organizations broadly. So do you have any advice on how we go about enticing groups to use privacy? And also, is there a world in which NIST could provide like a guidance or like some information about value generation enabled by pets in different legal frameworks, so that we don't have to like kind of guess at what pets can provide in different legal scenarios. Like there's some independent authority that says, hey, like in this, under this law in this situation, not only do consumers get these benefits, but the company also gets these benefits, and then we can use that to pull people in and like get people to agree to use pets more frequently.
Yeah, so I mean, on the latter point, NIST is a non-regulatory agency, so I'll just be straight and say, it's unlikely that we would ever put out something that would say, we have no authority to say like this will meet some sort of legal standard, but that would be something more like the Federal Trade Commission could do. But but our goal has always been to say, here's what, to do the metrology that will underpin what other regulatory authorities could then say. But on your earlier point, I mean, I know engineers, I mean, the world is trade-offs, so that's going to be. But I think one thing, notwithstanding that pets are called privacy enhancing technologies, is, it's not just for privacy, right? I actually think of pets often as sort of that, we have this Venn diagram that we use to talk about the relationship between security and privacy. And I think that pets often fit in that sweet spot that help you achieve both security and privacy. And sometimes, from a very pragmatic standpoint, right, they, like privacy preserving federated learning can help with, protecting IP, right, intellectual property. So I think that it's, I don't know, short-sighted to say like, this is only for privacy when you have many use cases that something could be used for that would then accrue to the benefit of privacy, not only from a moral standpoint, but just from a use and research standpoint, right? Like the more we use this, then the more we're going to learn about where to set epsilon and things like that. And even if it's being done for intellectual property reasons, that can still accrue, I think, to the benefit of use cases that are perhaps more purely privacy oriented. So, so I think it's helpful to expand and help people understand like the larger value and meet them where they are. I think there are some questions.
Yeah, I wanted to, so on the topic of epsilon, and I want to draw allusion not between differential privacy and security, but between differential privacy and machine learning. So the interesting thing about privacy is that like we say, we look at this in a legal context. We have stakeholders and lawyers and risk and are you leaking things? Are you risking people? I gather we're just sort of now starting to think about risk in AI and the types of regulations you need to manage that. And over there, they've got a similar sort of structural problem in the sense that they're working on data, data whose properties we don't necessarily have nice abstraction for. They're doing things to data, and when we get them set up, that involves picking a variety of parameters, epochs and a variety of things that substantially impact the performance of the machine learning and impact the risk. And but when those decisions are made in tech and companies and organizations, they're mostly not with tons of oversight. We get lots of oversight at Epsilon. It's a big thing everybody talks about for analogous parameters of analogous complexity in other situations. there aren't those discussions. And so to some extent, we've got this opportunity, if you want to look at it that way, with all the skepticism aimed at us, where we get to deal with things rigorously that in other environments have not been dealt with rigorously before. I'm a little optimistic. So but I think this is going to be not a question, but a comment. But when you talk about pinning down use cases, I think that's part of it. That we need to talk about properties of data sets that impact, performance of these algorithms, amounts of risk, impact of epsilon, the way the threat models operate, whether they're more or less successful. I've got a talk that is also on this slides tomorrow. Gary Howarth and I at the OpenDP session, which is my own best guess at some starting points towards this. Very much interested in other opinions. But I just wanted to say it's hard, but I think it is possible. And if it feels very different from security, I think that is because we're being asked to do something that is different than what they've had to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Christine.
We have at least 3 more questions, so I'm going to ask the question askers to keep it.
Yep. Hello, can you hear? Yeah. Thank you for the nice talk. I have a question for you. Like, we are at a very pivotal moment in humanity, or in a case in like the technological landscape, where lots of things are getting appended, and privacy is coming to the forefront, right? AI, consumer choice, like industries like advertising are getting disrupted, right? We had the AI executive order. And what I'm hearing is like, let's sort of slow roll privacy in. So I worry that we are not capitalizing on this to do the right thing of promoting even more aggressively the need for privacy technology and putting the right things in place. And the worry is we're going to go back to the time when the internet was built and build the wrong things, right? Like I see people completely changing their advertising stacks, but then legal coming and saying, oh, you don't need to use pets because they're not legally mandated, right? Or like government agencies saying like, yeah, we want to like do better, but we don't have funding to do the thing better. And so my question is like, what can we, community, NIST, government, do to capitalize on this moment and put the things in place more aggressively so that we have a better tomorrow?
Yeah, no, great question. And I hope I didn't come across as saying like this is the moment to capitalize. Like, we've been waiting and waiting, and I've been working for years, and people are like, oh, I'm not gonna too expensive to customize that, and so I mean, I go back, I think, to the ease of use, the abstraction layer, making it as easy and turnkey as it is possible. I think, we'll see how successful we are with the final version of the DP guidelines, but we, took on board a lot of comments, some of which were, this is too hard for non-technical people to understand. And so, we've created sort of flow charts now to like help non-technical people, even if they don't understand like the actual technical things, they can still do their due diligence. They can say, why did you make this choice versus that choice, right? And at least do that kind of due diligence, not only internally, but for vendors as well, right? Because in absence of certifications right now, it's too easy for vendors to sort of say whatever they want to say about the quality of their product. So we're trying to do those sorts of things, but having those kinds of, the metrics, I think the metrics and the ease of use are like the top things that I think would help advance this and make it more usable for non-technical people.
Hi, first of all, thank you. amazing talk. I love seeing things like this about like, how can we like bridge these gaps. My question is a little bit similar to sort of Ashwin's question, which is we're like, have in this room a lot of people who spend a large fraction of their day thinking about these tools and these challenges, and you have like really clearly articulated a lot of things that are hard and that we don't know. What can the folks in this room do to sort of like address those? Are there opportunities for sort of like a direct engagement with NIST? Is it allowed? Is it possible? Or sort of are there things we can be doing in our research that will provide some of the answers and the insights to allow you to more like, clearly address some of these challenges?
Yes. Well, first of all, yes, we love to engage. So as I said, we are setting up this test bed. We're doing it within our National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence, because that's a way to do easy partnerships or easier partnerships. Also, NSF has recently put out a funding opportunity, and they've named our test bed in there. So there's opportunities to put in proposals to work with us. So, we're open to to talk and see what we can do. Excuse me. Sorry, I'm overcoming a cold. Anyway, please get in touch.
The talk and lots of things for us to think about. You mentioned that standards may be some ways off for privacy, given how context dependent it is. And I'm wondering, is there anything intermediate, below standards, kind of a lower bar in terms of process and precision, maybe, but above, say, the kind of guidelines documents that you were referring to, but where there's still some sort of community process and community consensus reached. I don't have much familiarity with the standardization process outside of crypto standards. That might be worthwhile and could potentially provide some help address some of the uncertainty that adopters of privacy technology and differential privacy in particular currently face.
Yeah, I think that, what we've heard that organizations are really interested in is, even just a framework for how to evaluate pets. And I think that would be a really good activity for a community to, to work on together. So I think a framework is a great thing in between. This is awful. Sorry. Anyway, I think a framework sits in between, a very technical standard and guideline, and sort of above guidelines. So that would be something, if you want to talk more about that, we have some thoughts. So.
Thanks. Thank you for your talk. Just a very quick question towards the end, I think. I come from Europe, so I'm mostly maybe pro GDPR, I would say. And I think maybe to some degree, the bar is maybe actually, I feel a bit lower in terms of how we define what is anonymity. I've worked for the past 10 years as a computer scientist, showing how easy it is to re-identify data, to break privacy technologies. And sometimes I wonder, maybe, I don't know, cheekily, like, why actually should we have this like UK or US laissez-faire approach, which is we just need to lower the bar and let people use these pets? Maybe actually, I don't know, why not saying this class of technology should not be used for the moment because we don't know if they're safe, and raising the bar?
Because I think we have the example from security, right? Where, they're much further along with technical solutions. And I do think that, we allow risk and imperfection in lots of domains, like healthcare, right? I mean, it's not, like there are standards, right? But there's not perfection required. And so, you can, make cultures have to make their decisions on that, but I think the result, especially on sort of the US side, has been friction and lag in trying out technologies because it's not clear whether there's they're going to meet the legal standard. Whereas on security, they can do a lot more constant iteration on their technologies. So
I'm gonna take my chair's prerogative. Can I actually want to ask a question, sort of pushing back on that? I guess in a lot of laws and regulations, there's phrases like minimal risk of re-identification or reasonably likely to be used to blah 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 blah. And so I guess I see like the HIPAA expert determination standard as like a pretty clear counterexample to what you're saying, that there is a standard that says there's some risk threshold, it's a minimal risk. And despite the sort of ratcheting up of our understanding of the risks of re-identification, that industry has not adapted. And so I feel like I'm seeing exactly the opposite dynamic of what you're describing, at least in the context of HIPAA de-identification, but also in the context of like de-identified ad linkage, privacy preserving ad linkage. So I don't know, I guess my question is like, why, how do I square that with what you're describing as like such a high bar that nobody's even trying?
well, I think the HIPAA is, again, like sort of unique example. So one, they had like a prescribed way to do it, which wasn't mathematically, provable and it wasn't guaranteed. Or you had this just like amorphous expert opinion. And so that sort of like left you swinging like between sort of these two extremes. And then, but when you talk about the ad business, so, we don't have, like, they're just not regulated. So they have no reason to do anything other than sort of pressure. So we just don't have like a consistent law that gives like a sort of consistent approach. So we have all these different sectors and sort of different approaches within that. So so I think that security is a little bit more consistent. I mean, it's more consistent because it's security, right? It's a little more, I don't want to say binary, but it's it's just a little bit more understandable in that way. So applying crypto in one sense is, you can apply it in this domain, you can apply it in that domain. So it's a little bit easier to like get more widespread adoption. But I don't think that the differing standards or no standards in some cases is very helpful.